Sex tourism in Thailand, a $6.4 billion industry that people rarely discuss honestly. Today, we're exploring a raw, first hand account that challenges everything we think we know about relationships in Thailand's tourist districts.
That's fascinating. What specifically makes this account so different from others?
Well, it centers around this young woman's 20th birthday in Phuket. And what really struck me was how matter of fact she is about the whole thing. It's this significant milestone because it means she can legally work in certain establishments. But she describes it without any drama or self pity.
So, how do they mark these kinds of milestones in that culture?
Oh man, it's actually quite elaborate. The bars make this whole celebration out of it: decorations, food, and this fascinating tradition where people attach money to garlands worn around the birthday person's neck. She collected about 10,000 Thai baht just from that tradition alone. That's roughly 300 US dollars, which is pretty significant considering the average monthly wage there.
That's such an interesting intersection of tradition and commerce. What happens next?
Well, that's where we meet Colin, this 58-year-old Australian FIFO worker who becomes central to the story. He's been watching her for months, and on her birthday, she finally agrees to leave with him. What's fascinating is how she describes the physical disparity. She's 46 kilograms. He's about 20 stone, but she's completely pragmatic about it.
The emotional labor involved must be intense. How does she handle that aspect?
That's exactly what makes this account so compelling. She's developed these sophisticated coping mechanisms. Like she talks about how she just blots out the intimate moments and focuses on the financial aspects. But what's really interesting is her support system with another worker named Rung. They've created this whole network of mutual protection.
Tell me more about how these economic relationships actually work in practice.
It's quite structured, actually. There are standard rates for different services, but experienced workers like her know how to negotiate better terms. Like, there's this moment where she's actually annoyed that Colin only gave her 3,000 baht one morning when he'd given her 5,000 the day before. And all of this money gets channeled back to family support. She immediately uses some to help her family buy a motorcycle.
That really shows how these individual choices connect to broader family economics, doesn't it?
Exactly, and what's really fascinating is how Colin starts developing real feelings, giving her this gold necklace worth 12,000 baht, talking about marriage, sharing his personal history. But she maintains this professional distance while still managing his expectations. It's like watching a masterclass in emotional intelligence.
How common are these kinds of arrangements in tourist areas like Phuket?
Well, based on recent statistics, there are over 200,000 sex workers in Thailand, with about 60% working in tourist areas. But what's really interesting is how the industry has evolved. These aren't just simple transactions anymore. They've developed into these complex relationships with unwritten rules, social hierarchies, and sophisticated support networks.
That's quite different from how these relationships are usually portrayed.
Absolutely right. And that's what makes this account so valuable. It shows how these women maintain agency and dignity in challenging circumstances. They're not just passive participants, they're actively managing these relationships, supporting each other, and making strategic decisions about their futures. It really challenges our preconceptions about power dynamics in these situations.
Looking ahead, what does this tell us about how tourism impacts local communities?
That's the big question. This story shows how globalization and tourism create these complex new social and economic dynamics. It's not just about the obvious impacts, it's about how communities adapt, how people create support systems, and how they navigate these challenging intersections of culture, commerce, and human connection. And that's something we really need to understand better as global tourism continues to grow.